Hi there, everyone, and welcome to the Novel Strip Show, where I discuss books and comics. This is the third part of my October 2018 wrap up, and this is the third and final part of my review of Strange the Dreamer and its sequel, Muse of Nightmares. This is the third part in the review series, and it contains a lot more spoilers and just kind of questions that I have left over and things that I wasn't too sure about and that I feel need to be discussed in further detail. So I really did love the book, and I think that's evidenced in my first and second reviews. In this, however, there are some things that I'm unsure about or that I didn't like, and they require talking about plot points further. So there will be spoilers in this. If you haven't read the book, please don't watch this video until you have, and instead go and watch the first review, perhaps the second review as well, because there's no real spoilers in the second review, but I just discuss things in a bit more detail, and I think it's good to go into the book knowing relatively little. So without further ado, I'll just go straight on and discuss my thoughts for the final part of this review. In terms of what I liked then and what I didn't like in more explicit detail, the I love you between Sarai and Laszlo, it really got on my nerves. As I said in the first part of this review, I really liked it when they were just sort of they'd found this connection, but they weren't putting a label on it. They obviously, I'm not expecting them to go out and date in it or anything like that, but obviously they do have a date where they have the cake and stuff in the dream world, and I quite like that. But then I just feel like they say I love you far too quickly, and it's weird because she's fucking dead. Like, Sarai is dead. Laszlo's a necrophiliac. Like, it to me, it was very much any YA romance, as I've already said. It could have been Twilight or something, and I expected better. So with the new characters, Cora and Nova, who are introduced, that sort of direction with the origins of the god and things like that, I wasn't expecting that at all when the second book started, and I loved it. With their romance, I really expected more. I did not expect a standard teen romance, and that's what I got. I expected it to go a different way. So Sarai is dead. Either I wanted her incorporeal, so there was that, struggle there of, well, we love each other, but we can't touch each other. She, for all intents and purposes, she was better off dead than alive. She still had a physical body. They could still touch. They could still make love. They could still kiss. And that, I just feel like there was basically no consequence to her dying. Initially, obviously, she was ruled over by Minya, and that created kind of an interesting dynamic. I wish that hadn't happened at the end of the first book. I do wish that had waited until the second book, and in the first book, Sarai had just been dead, and then it ended there. I really wish that had happened, because it was very predictable. I was like, well, Minya's just going to bring her back, and that's fine. That's exactly what happened. But if I hadn't known that until the second book, I would have preferred it. And I do, I really did like it where Minya's controlling her, because again, that's something a bit different. But then obviously they drug Minya, so that quite early on as well into the second book. So then that element was taken away, and it doesn't really ever come back. So there just wasn't enough conflict for me. It was very much, I think this could be a burgeoning romance. Holy shit, she just died. But actually, it doesn't really matter, because her godmate has just brought her back, and she's got a solid body and everything like that. So that's fine. It can keep on burgeoning potentially, even though you're shagging a dead girl, so it's going to be a bit weird, or it should be a bit weird, but apparently it's not. And then, oh wait, though, the girl who's brought her back is really, really fucking evil. So she's actually gonna control your relationship, or stop your relationship, or threaten to make her hurt you or kill you, or let her go so you'll never see her again if you don't do a bidding and stuff. That was all interesting. And then, oh no, we're back to it again. Okay, she's been drugged, so you can just go and do whatever the hell you want. And that's fine. And then Minya is taken away from the Seraph, so she loses her power. So then it looks like Sarai's gonna die, but then no, Thyone brings out his knife, and Yeah, it was just all very much what you kind of expected. And I think it could have been so much more if either Laszlo had been like, "Well, you're dead now. This is," or Soraya, if there had been some consequence to her actually dying, that would have been new and novel and far more interesting. Or even if they had just not known what to do and they'd just been like, "What the hell? You're dead. Like, we still have dreams together. We still have this, but how can we ever like?" think this is going to go anywhere, like think this is going to burgeon into love. And I really, like, you've never had any kind of romantic relationship before, and now you're just suddenly saying I love you. It just, yeah, so that part really did let the book down for me. As I said, I actually liked it in the first book, but in the second book it did, yeah, it just felt very typically YA, and that disappointed me. But it certainly wasn't the worst, and I have definitely read worse romance, but that, yeah, annoyed me. What also annoyed me is after Minya was poisoned, I just felt the dialogue afterwards where Sparrow's like, I poisoned her, I poisoned Minya, and then or maybe Ruby says that, and then just that whole scene afterwards, it felt like, I know you poisoned her. You don't need to tell me that you've poisoned her. I got that because you put some shit in her tea and then she fell down. Like, don't spell it out for me, because you've not done that for the rest of the book, which is why I liked it. So why, yeah, just that whole bit afterwards, I just felt the dialogue was incredibly clunky, and could have been far better edited, or just left out, and just been like, yeah. So that annoyed me. But whilst we're on Minya, the whole thing with her killing the Ellens, the whole thing is, it's made out to be this kind of big mystery, and it's just a bit crap when you find out what actually happened. So I mean, I feel like the reason I don't like it is, if we'd known from the start that the Ellens were human, we would have known exactly what happened. That Minya brought them back. However, she then shaped them into nice people. It would have been obvious, but we weren't told that. Also, it didn't appear at any point that they were gods. And it just felt like it was like we were being deliberately misled, and information was withheld from us so that we could never find it out ourselves, rather than withholding information that was there. You just didn't pick up on it or notice it. I just feel it was quite poor, and the whole mystery surrounding them could have been a bit better. And also, when they're different from the rest of the ghosts, because they stop and they don't do anything when Minya is drugged. The fact that that's because they were the first ghosts she caught, and because she, I don't know, manipulated them more than the other ghosts. And, so even at the end, where their tethers are like, they've become a part of her and stuff like that. I didn't really like that bit as much, because it just seemed, I don't really think it added that much. It just, yeah, it wasn't to my personal taste, that part. So yeah, I also think there were other things which could have been far better fleshed out. So for example, with Theon, it's mentioned that he has cuts on his hand other than the marks where he drew his spirit out. And then that's never mentioned again. So what were these? Were these like him just cutting himself as a form of self-harm? I wouldn't have had a problem with that if it was actually, explored and dealt with, but just saying he's got other cuts, not even Strange knew what they were. What the fuck are they then? Like, you need to give me a bit more than that, because there's no hint of him ever, self-harming elsewhere. And I feel like with something like that, you can't just throw it in there and then not deal with it. Also, this idea of what, spirit is, it's mentioned that it's a clear fluid that's not blood. And it seems to be only people from Laszlo's world who have it. But I would have liked that to be explored a bit more, as I loved that the gods, weren't really gods, kind of. They just made themselves into gods. They had their own origin story. I really didn't see that coming, and I really, really liked it. If this idea of spirit, what is it? Where does it come from, etc.? What makes it unique? Is it just people in Laszlo's world who have it? What does it actually mean? I would have loved that as well. Because that I almost thought it was going to be like in his Dark Materials where they have demons, but it just wasn't, and it was just kind of there, and it just seemed really, really pointless and unnecessary. And I think that's what annoys me most, that there were things here which could have been great if they had been explored in more detail. And I think part of the problem is that alongside Strange the Dreamer, I'm reading my ongoing series of The Demon Cycle by Peter V. Brett, and in this book he goes into so much detail about everything. Like, every character who's introduced who has a name has a backstory, has some significance in some way. I know everything about them. I know where they were born, the last meal they ate, the last 5 sexual partners, their cup size. Like, it's so much about them, sometimes a bit too much, but I like that because they have a purpose. Whereas here, there were a whole list of characters who were given names, and they were brought along for the journey, and then they were just gone. Like, there was an explosion and they pissed off, and then you never find out anything else about them. So yeah, I just felt as though that was a wasted opportunity. And with the languages as well, for example, so it's mentioned that the document that they find, which contains information about where the other godspawn were taken, was written in an alphabet that was not the alphabet of Weep. I'm assuming it was the alphabet of the gods' home world, that where Nova and Korra are from, and well, I guess all the other gods are from. It was the language of that world, but it was just never really explored, to be honest. It just kind of felt that the languages were there to jump on the bandwagon of fantasy that has made up languages. And I just, would have liked a bit more. Again, comparing it to the Demon Cycle, it's perhaps not a fair comparison, but I'm reading the two, or rather, midway through the Demon Cycle, whilst I was reading Strange the Dreamer, and so the comparison's naturally there in my mind. But there are words, there are foreign words of foreign language in the Demon Cycle that are completely made up, but they're always made up for a reason. It's not just said, oh, they have a different alphabet. Like, and to be fair, Strange the Dreamer does do it with, the words at the beginning of every chapter. It's a word in one of the languages, either that of Weep, or of Laszlo's people, or of the gods, and that's great. Like, I really did like that. It certainly doesn't do as badly as I might be making it seem with made-up languages, but yeah, I just wish it had been explored and utilised a bit more. I think there were so many things that started off great, and then they were just left hanging, and they weren't, fleshed out and utilised to make them relevant and necessary, because, if Ferrell hadn't, he was always poring over this book, desperate to decipher it, and then he doesn't go on a journey to decipher it or anything. It's just kind of mentioned, it was in this strange language, it must have been the language of the god's homeworld. Now they've deciphered it and they can go on a journey and stuff. It wasn't really his journey, as Laszlo had the journey to decipher the language of Weep and stuff, which is something that I really, really liked. So yeah, that kind of, for me, let it down a bit as well. The main thing that really, really, really annoys me is, how exactly did Errolfane kill the gods? How did he lead this big rebellion when, Nova, who for all intents and purposes is the most powerful character in the book, yes, she just came into power, but when she fights Scarthis and the other gods, she loses. She gets thrown out of the ship, and then, it takes her years to try and track them down. When she does, get to Weep, she's pretty much unstoppable. She's completely omnipotent, and no one can really stop her. So the fact that, being so powerful, she wasn't able to stop Scarthis, how then could Errolfane, who was kept as a plaything of the goddess of despair for years, he suddenly manages to kill all of the gods, not just one of them, all of them. So he is basically, I really liked his story, because it seemed to me that it's, you know, the fact that he felt love, but then he also felt complete despair. He was kind of up and down. He was, you know, almost completely destroyed by her. He had this desire and he had some sort of pleasure, but his whole existence was marred by hatred, but also by, you know, her darkness that she brought out in him and things like that. I very much saw that as an allegory for mental illness and the feelings that you can feel when suffering from depression. So yeah, so if he, like, the fact that he rose above that and killed the gods, brilliant, great, wonderful. How, though? How did he do that? He's completely broken. Yes, he's kind of inspired by his wife's screams as they're torturing her, and he decides he's going to do something about it. He's going to do whatever he can to make that stop. Wonderful. How can he physically do that? Even if it was something as simple as he discovered this specific weapon, or he discovered a specific book from the library, because again, the library seems to have been given this wonderful significance, and then it just gets fucking buried again. They've rescued a few books. That's wonderful. What do they do with those books? I don't know. It's just left hanging. But yeah, if he'd gone to the library, if he discovered the secret of how to kill the gods, that would be absolutely fine. But we're never ever given that detail. And to me, that's a huge plot hole in the book. How does a mere mortal, whose people and who their entire race has been enslaved by these gods, such is their power, he and his will have been completely broken, such is the god's power. However, somehow, magically, they can make the people do whatever they want. You know, all of the gods individually pretty much have the power to enslave their entire race. They're working together to enslave their entire race. Yet somehow he rises up and just kills them all. Yes, he has other people to help him, but what do they do? Why, whenever anyone came at Scarthis, why did he not just use the god's metal to just kill them all and massacre them? Why did he not change the Seraph into a massive, like, throw-in star and just swing through the crowds, massacring them all, cutting them all in half? It makes absolutely no sense. And so yeah, major plot point there. But yeah, obviously talking about those things, I kind of had to talk about them here, because I've already talked about the other things that made me love the book, and I genuinely do love it and would recommend it to people. But I think those are the things that those spoilers are the things that, yeah, specifically were a downside to me, and all the positives I've been able to talk about previously without giving any spoilers away. So yeah, I know that the end of the review seemed very, very negative. Overall, I still really enjoyed the book and would still recommend it. But yeah, if you've read the book, or I hope you have, if you got to this stage of the video, please let me know your thoughts on that, because I would be very intrigued to hear them. And if you've got opinions about the book or answers to any of my questions, I'd love to hear them. Thanks for watching.